to say that you still have joy, because only God can give you joy. Only God can give you joy. And I thank God this morning that he's still handing out joy. I thank God that you can have peace in the midst of the storm. You can. And so, you might as well set yourself, because you're going to go through. You're going to have some things that happen to you. You're going to be knocked down, and people will look at you sideways. But you know what? Just set yourself so you can go through. You can still have joy. You can have peace in the middle of the storm. And so I praise God for that. I thank God for his goodness, and I thank God for the distance that we have gone with the study of the prophets, and waiting on Pastor Bland to get that up, and we will go from there. I actually wanted to take a look at our little graphic on rightly dividing the word of truth. We haven't visited that in a while, and so I wanted to look at that, and we don't take credit for that. That actually came from rightly dividing the word of truth, but I just want to take a look at that for just a moment, just so we can just kind of, reacclimate ourselves to that. Let's see, so this one over here, okay, so somebody get Ephesians, the second chapter. Get Ephesians, the second chapter. I know the lights are off. It's Ephesians 2, verse 11. Ephesians 2, verse 11. Okay, anybody have it? Or I hear pages flipping. I'll give you just a couple of minutes.
I have it, Mother.
Okay, can you read that for me?
You said 2 and 11.
Ephesians 2 and 11.
Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcised by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands.
All right, Brother Brown, can you read Ephesians 2 and 12?
That at that time ye were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in the world.
Okay, so that's talking about us. They're talking about us? Okay, so at this point, this is times past. Or no hope without God in the world. With no hope, times past. This is times past. It's for us. It's for us. Can we get some stuff out of this? Or can we get doctrine out of this? So we cannot get doctrine out of this, but we can get some things to help us on this journey, can't we? That's what we're doing now. And so on this journey right now, we're looking at what? From Genesis to Malachi? From Genesis to Malachi. So we're having a slow roll through the Bible, as we talk about, as we chronicle the Bible. And this is the way we have chosen to break it up. Times past, but now, and ages to come. So right now we're in the part we've gone through, we've talked about where Adam came, and then God called out Abraham and called a people out of Abraham, called a nation out of Abraham, actually came out of his loins. And then we've gone through Moses being the deliverer, and then we've gone through Israel asking for a king and God giving them a king. And we've looked at David, how that David sat on the throne, and that's important to know because the Messiah comes through his lineage. Is that correct? And so it's important for us to understand that in order for us to be able to connect the dots. And so what does 2 Timothy 3 and 16 say?
All scripture.
Go ahead.
Okay. All scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness.
Okay, thank you very much. And so then all scriptures, God inspired. But this scripture, these scriptures that we're talking about, when we're looking at Genesis through Malachi, it's inspired by God, but our doctrine is not found in that. Pastor Bland?
You just clarified, you had said before, you said that, can we get doctrine there? And the 3 and 16 says that all scripture is profitable, for doctrine, but to kind of make it clearer, it's doctrine, but it's not our doctrine.
It's not our doctrine. Thank you, Pastor Bland. Thank you, Pastor Bland. And so just wanted to revisit that because we, just wanted to just touch bases every now and then on that, because sometimes you wonder, why are we doing what we're doing, and why do we do it the way we do it? And the way we do it, the reason is because that's the right division of it for us, okay? All right, let's see if this is working today. Am I doing that? Okay, so we're in the study of Micah, and I want you to take note that after we leave Micah, we're going to the book of Isaiah. We're going to the book of Isaiah. So, Micah, when we talked last Sunday, we talked about it. Micah was out prophesying, and he was bringing everybody into account of themselves. And when he began to talk to them, he held them accountable for two particular sins. And we ended our discussion last Sunday talking about those, one being covetousness and listening to false prophets. Okay, so one, covetousness, want everything that you can get, want everything that you can get, and then listening to lies. And then if you listen to a lie long enough, you'll tell a lie. Okay, and so he said, no, you know what, y'all need to be held accountable for that. So when we ended last Sunday, we had a talk about it, and it was, how is materialism evident in today's society? How does it affect the church, and how can materialism be remedied? And so y'all talked about a lot of things. It was a very lively discussion. I got a lot out of it. We said that, yes, it has even crept into the church. You got churches, building bigger buildings, and we got your churches having bigger membership drives, and churches competing against each other, and just a lot of materialism, a lot of flashiness, a lot of bells and whistles. But as we ended last Sunday, we talked about the remedy for materialism is to try to be content with what God has given you. So I have a statement here from Jeremiah Burroughs. Jeremiah Burroughs was an English preacher back in the 1600s. And he wrote a book, and the book is called The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. And here's a statement that he made. A Christian comes to contentment not so much by way of addition as by way of subtraction. Contentment does not come by adding to what you have, but by subtracting from what you desire. The world says that you will find contentment when your possessions rise to meet the level of your desires. The Christian has another way to contentment. That is, he can bring his desires down to his possessions. And so contentment then is finding joy in what God has given you. What God has given you, Carl Ray.
But it's kind of like what God gave you. He said that it's not what you get that makes your life, but what you can do without.
Yes, exactly. Brother Brown, did you have your hand up? I saw somebody's hand. Brother Alex? Yes, he said it with a tune. Yes, he did. Be thankful for what you have. And that's when godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. When you can be satisfied with what God has given you, mother, when you can be satisfied, when you can look at what you have, and always you can make what you have, make what you have. But you looking at somebody else and comparing what you have with what they have, then do something with what you got.
I know it's too many us men that have not realized the value of something we saw somebody else with.
Oh, is that true?
I get too many amen, that's all.
You get one from me. You get one from me. And then, I'll turn around and look at you and say, I told you. Brother Brown.
One would have to experience things in order to appreciate, to be content. Now, if you never had anything, it's easy for a person, you have to have had something, I think, you know, and the Lord has to bring you to a point to where you can appreciate it.
Oh yes, that is, you just hit the nail on the head. And that is what Paul meant when Paul said, look, I didn't get to where I am overnight. He said, I've learned to be content. He said, I've learned to be content. He said, I know how to have a whole lot. I know how to have a little.
So you're not born being content.
No.
So finally, sometimes when you get what you want, it's not what you want.
You come to a place, I tell you what, let's just say it like this. Let's say it like this. Okay, you had a job, you were making, let's just say, $70,000 on the job. Okay, you know you got used to living off of a $70,000 income. But then something happened where they said they didn't need you anymore. So you went from that job making $70,000 to getting $300 non-employment. Okay, what you gonna do? You gonna turn your nose up at the $300? You got to learn. You got to learn how to be content with from 70,000 to 300 a week. You got to learn how to be content, and you can do it. I know we say a lot of times we can't. I couldn't do it. I just can't. Honey, it's a whole lot of people that live on a whole lot less. A whole lot less.
And I agree with Brother Brown that experience helps a lot. But people can tell you stuff. Yes, sir. You know, like folks tell you something, money won't make you happy. And you've been broke all your life, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that, because that look like money will answer all your problems. But I never, because I worked in the factory and all that, and I never made no whole lot. I never had no good job like the post office, and, AP&L and stuff. Folks that make good money like that. And then I went to being a lawyer, and you making a few $100,000 a year. But then your bills. All of a sudden, all of my bills wasn't $1,000 a month. Now my bills are $10,000 a month and stuff like that. And I just wanted to just throw that money and throw everything away. Look like I was happier.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you something. Pressure. Yeah, not only that, but when when people think you got something, when people think you got something, they want to tell you how to spend your money and want to spend your money too.
I said this, I learned this from you. Carl Ray, Lady Deborah, I don't care what she got. She walk around like she ain't got nothing. And you know what she told me about it? Carl Ray, you know what she told me about that? I said, well, why are people always asking me and don't never ask you nothing? Found out I don't find it necessary. I tell folks everything I can. I don't find it necessary to tell everybody, and I don't find it necessary, Sister Keisha, to spend everything that I have.
Lady Deborah, I know some people that makes all kind of bukus of money, and you know buku. You never heard that term? But anyway, what is the point I'm making? They make, and I know people that make way less money than make them not like you said, $300 or $400 a week, and look like the person that's making $200 or $300 a week and can be doing better than the person that's making a whole bunch of money, because it's the way a person manage, and not only that, they put God first in their life. Yeah. And God will stretch that little.
He will. He will do it. He will do it.
That's right.
We hear that all the time. That's a testimony.
It's how you manage it.
I believe that. I believe you've seen even in the news how little old women, how they worked in somebody's home, they did domestic service for somebody, and they didn't make much money, but they put enough back to give somebody a scholarship. They put enough back to send 2 or 3 people to college, and not their children, but somebody else's child. And so it can be done. So we have to watch that. in the church especially, when that spirit creeps into the church, that materialism, that's what was going on back in Micah's day. You had people that had money, but they didn't want anybody else to have anything. And God didn't intend for that to be. They had money, and then they were trying to grab up everything they could. The poor little people that was around them didn't have a chance because they were trying to buy up all the property around them. Now, in the Mosaic law, we talked a little bit about this, required that the land stay with the families and remain in the tribes. And so we know that the land was the Lord. He leased it to the people. Let's go over to Leviticus, the 25th chapter. And if we did this last Sunday, forgive me, just a refresher. Leviticus 25, verse 2. 25:2. 25 and 2. And then I'm going to read 23 and 38. Okay, so in Leviticus 25 and 2, it says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord." And so just like the people were required to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, the land, he required that the land have a Sabbath too, because he wanted the land to keep producing. And so you had to give the land a rest in order for the land to keep producing, in order for them to have sustenance. And so in verse 23, Leviticus 25 and 23, it says, "The land shall not be sold forever." But now we're over in Micah, and that's just what they're doing. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is whose? The land is mine. For you are what? Strangers and sojourners with me. Look at verse 38. It says, verse 38, Leviticus 25 and 38 says, "I am the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, to give you the land," to give you the land of Canaan, and be your God. And so then, stay in Leviticus, stay there and go to Leviticus 18. So then, disobedience then is what caused the land to be defiled. And any time you were disobedient, then you invited in the judgment of God. And so Leviticus 18 says this, Leviticus 18, and let's look at verse 24, Leviticus 18 and 24. Let me find it. Leviticus 18 and 24 says, "Defile not yourselves in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you. And the land is defiled, therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself vomiteth out her inhabitants. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you. For all these abominations have the men of the land done, which were before you, and the land is defiled. That the land spew not you out also when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. For whosoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them, shall be cut off from among their people. Therefore shall ye keep mine ordinance, that ye commit not any one of these abominable customs which were committed before you, and that ye defile not yourselves. Therein I am the Lord your God." So disobedience, God. And so I always say Israel was without excuse. They went into nothing with their eyes closed, because God had given them fair warning. God had always given them admonitions. He told them through his servants. He told them through his prophets, okay, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. So, don't act like you don't know. you know exactly what's going to happen to you. And so as we began to talk earlier, then the robber barons, those people who had money but wanted to acquire more wealth, and they did that by stepping on the backs of poor people. Same thing that's going on today. You know, the same thing that's going on today, you know, poor and oppressed. And don't think it's not happening. I know sometimes we insulate ourselves in our little world, and we think that people don't experience those. People are not oppressed, but there's some oppression going on in 2018. Some oppression going on. People are trying to snap up everything that they can. They were bent on buying up all of the property so that they could enslave the poor. Enslave the poor. And all of it was because they wanted more money. They wanted more money. Now, same thing that's going on today. Because of their money, they control the courts and the councils at the gates. Because, you know, they still had a system of government there, not like the one we have, but same thing was going on. Now, I don't really know this, but I believe, oh, yeah, well, in the news, you know, the little boy who, I can't even remember what he did, but they called it the crime of affluence, which he didn't get. His penalty wasn't as hefty as somebody else who's poor and went before the judge. So in my mind, if you got the right amount of money, if you got the right amount of affluence, then you have more influence. And so is that fair? That's why you got to call on the Lord, because he's the only righteous judge. He is the only righteous judge. And so they had enough money, then they could buy what they wanted to buy. They could buy a decision. They could buy something, a law, and change the law. You see what I'm saying? And so, you know, the same thing is going on today. And so in Micah, the false prophets, now he goes on and he talks about the false prophets. Okay, so look at chapter 3, verse 5. Chapter 3 in Micah, back over in Micah. Okay, so the prophets attacked Micah, as they did all the prophets, for faithfully declaring the message of God. Okay, so here is what they said. The basis of their theology was, well, God won't ever let anything like that happen to us. Because what was Micah declaring? Micah was declaring, okay, keep doing what you're doing and you're going into captivity. Keep doing what you're doing and God's going to judge you. Well, their theology was, okay, no. We're Abraham's children. We're Abraham's seed, and God won't let anything like that happen to us. God won't let anything happen to us because we still going to the temple. We still making sacrifices, and we're still doing we're still serving the Lord. But they weren't serving the Lord with their whole hearts, because they serve God, but then they turn around and serve idols too. And so thus said the Lord concerning the prophets that make my people err, that bite with their teeth and cry peace, and he that putteth not into their mouths, they even prepare war against him. Therefore night shall be unto you, that ye shall not have a vision, and it shall be dark unto you, that ye shall not divine. And the sun shall go down over the prophets, and the day shall be dark over them. Then shall the seers be ashamed, and the diviners confounded. Yea, they shall all cover their lips, for there is no answer of God. And it's bad when you say that you are a prophet of God. So when you say that, you know, you're speaking for the Lord, but God tells you, and you're not going to have a word. You're not going to have a word. You'll look for a word, and there's not going to be a word. It says, in verse 9, hear this, I pray you, ye heads of the house of Jacob and princes of the house of Israel, that abhor judgment and pervert all iniquity. They build up Zion with blood and Jerusalem with iniquity. The heads thereof judge for reward, and the priests thereof teach for hire, and the prophets thereof divine for money. Yet will they lean upon the Lord and say, is not the Lord among us? Not evil can come upon us. See, this is what I just said. Oh, the Lord is among us. He's not going to let anything happen to us. Therefore shall Zion for your sake be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountain of the house as the high places of the forest. And so Micah's second message, and we've kind of already gotten into that, where he rebuked the leaders of the nation for their sinful conduct. And then he outlined the events that would usher in the promised kingdom. So in chapter 4, he began to talk about the last days. He began to talk about the last days. Well, he rebuked them. They were not only permitting the wealthy to exploit the poor, but they were also doing it themselves. Okay, so when we talk about leaders, and let's talk about leaders. Let's talk about leaders. We can look at it in the natural and we can look at it in the spiritual. But when you're talking about it in a spiritual sense, if you got a leader, you got someone who's over you as a leader. A leader is supposed to love good, and hate the evil. But then when you look at this, these men were doing just the opposite. They hated the good and loved the evil. Now, who can profit from that? No. And so look, let's go over to Exodus 18th chapter. Exodus 18. So, Moses, as he was leading the people, Moses had a big task for leading the people. How many of you know leadership is not an easy task? It's not an easy task. No, and it's just, I'm talking about leadership, period. In your home sometimes, that's not easy, is it? It's not easy being a leader in your home. On your job, it's not easy being a leader. Now, there are some aspects of it that can be easy. But I'm speaking in a general sense. It's just not easy, because you're going to run into a conflict. I was in a session yesterday where we talked about conflict resolution. And one thing about it is, as sure as you live, Brother Arthur, you're going to have some conflict with somebody. There's no sense in you thinking you're going to go through this world easy peasy and then you're not going to ever, you're going to agree with everybody. No, you're not going to agree with everybody. I had them laughing at the table I was sitting at. I said, you know what? Really, sometimes conflict, I'm in conflict with myself. There's struggle going on in my own head. I'm fighting with myself. I got conflict I got to deal with, and conflict I need to work out in my own self. So it's not easy leading people, and Moses had it hard. He had it hard. He was leading the people, and the people didn't always. It was hard. He had a lot of people to lead, and he was trying to do everything himself. So his father-in-law had to come and talk to him about it and said, look, just listen, let me give you some advice. And that's one thing about being a leader. You need to be in a place where you can accept some advice or some counseling from somebody, because somebody can help you. And Jethro came to him, and in chapter 18, verse 21, he had said to him, you need to look out among you. You need to look and select some people that can help you. He says, moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s and rulers of 10. So in some respect, that's what an ideal leader would look like. What are some other things you think an ideal leader? People, if someone's over you, what do you want them? What characteristics do you want them to have? Brother Alex? Humble, humility, good character, truthful, fair, confident, Approachable, that's a good one. Approachable, those are good. Sympathetic. Doesn't sound like y'all talking about our president, but anyway, keep going. But keep on moving. Well, I digress. Go on. Respect.
They have to be strong, and then they have to be able to show their strength.
Can't be afraid to step out.
Yeah, because if you're leading and you're leading someone and they see you in fear, maybe the whole shit goes.
But at the same time, would you want them to be vulnerable? Would you want to be, and I guess that's in some way approachable. Would you want to know that, okay, they're just a person just like me. A person just like me. So,
Say, as long as, if you lead them, you make sure that you're leading them in the right direction. You're not going to want somebody to follow. They're not going to follow you if you're going the wrong way.
right. That's exactly right. And so all of those are things we will want our leader to possess, characteristics that we would want our leader to possess. And so now, by that same token, if we want our leaders to possess those, then what about us? It would be helpful for us to have some of those same characters. Really, we don't want to to get in our mind that the leader is some type of superhero, some type of superhero. Indestructible, nothing can happen, impenetrable, nothing can happen to them. They should be at all times, got a smile on their face all times, and nothing is ever wrong with them. Now, I don't understand that now, and I tell you what y'all are doing is say, we paying that, we, you need to come in here and act right, and so, we have to be empathetic and sympathetic as well. Okay, so as he rebuked the false prophets, I want to go over to Jeremiah, because remember that this is the contemporary here of Micah. Let's go over to Jeremiah, the 5th chapter. Let's look at Jeremiah 5. And see, because this is the same thing that was going on. Jeremiah 5, and let's look at verse 30. Okay, are you there? Jeremiah 5, let's see. It says a wonderful, and wonderful there means an astonishing. It's an astonishing thing. An astonishing and horrible thing is committed in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests bear rule by their means. And my people love to have it so. What? My people love to have it so. And what will ye do in the end thereof? Y'all, same thing going on today.
Amen.
People love to have it so. Tell me what I want to hear. I don't want to hear nothing about follow peace with all men and holiness. Without holiness, no man. We don't want to hear that God is a holy God. Don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that, and we want to hear, it's all right. Go ahead and do it. We want to hear that. Just make it the best way you can. That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear. But how many of you know God's word is still right?
Yes, it is.
God's word is still right.
Yes, Lord.
And so the same thing that was going on then is going on now. Go back to Micah. And so God's true prophet, and then I'm kind of going back and forth, but God's true prophet is described in Micah 3 and 8. Micah 3 and 8. Micah says, but truly I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord, and of judgment and of might, to declare unto Jacob his transgression, and to Israel his sin. And again, I say you got to have, when you're speaking what God has given you to speak. And we talked about that earlier, about the characteristics of a leader. You got to have the courage, as Brother Brown said, you got to have the courage to speak it. God said it, then you speak it. You speak it, and you do it with authority. You don't back down. You don't back down. You make your face, your forehead like flint. God said it, you keep it moving. You keep it moving. And so Micah fearlessly told the people their sins and warned them that judgment was coming. I don't care if you want to hear it. You might want to hear it. You don't want to hear it. I'm telling you what God said. I'm telling you what God said. And then the false prophets, same thing going on today. They tickled the ears of the people and told them what they wanted to hear. So my people would have, Jeremiah said, my people would have it to be so. So go back over to Micah, and let's look at Micah. Let's look at the 6th. No. I want to go back to the 5th chapter. I want to go to the 5th chapter because I want to take a look at the 5th chapter. I want you to see where he has a prophecy about the coming Messiah. He has a prophecy about the coming Messiah. Okay, so in Micah, the 5th chapter, give me just a second. Okay, it says, now gather thyself in troops. I'm in chapter 5, verse 1. Gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. You know, he's got to be talking about Jesus because he is everlasting. He is everlasting. Therefore will he give them up until the time that she which travaileth have brought forth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. And he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, and the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall abide for now, shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. And this man shall be the peace when the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. Okay, so then he moves from the destruction of Jerusalem because he tells them what's going to happen. You're going to go and everything's just going to be laid bare. And he begins to talk about then what's going to happen in the last day. And so in the last days, when he begins to talk, that period, the last days, begins with the ministry of Christ. So we go over to Hebrews. Let's look at Hebrews, the 1st chapter. Are you there?
Amen.
Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1 says, God, who at sundry times and in divers manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the world. And so Micah begins to talk about the last days. He talks about, go back over to Micah, he talks about how when the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem. And then he's going to talk about how he's coming back to establish a kingdom. He's coming back. They're going to strike his cheek with a rod, but he's coming back to establish a kingdom. And so Micah then began to talk about the promises that God made for his people. He promised them a kingdom. He promised them deliverance. He promised them conquest. And you're still going into captivity. You know, you're still going into captivity. But now, remember now, God is a God who doesn't speak idle words. Not like us. God says he means what he says. And when God says something, you can count on what he says. So he talks to them about a kingdom, deliverance, conquest, then talk to them about their king. Their king's coming. And so that's an encouraging scene, if you think about it. You think about all that Israel was going through at that time. You think about their disobedience. And the prophets telling them, now you're going to go into judgment. You're going into captivity. But to see that God had promises that he was still going to bring them back into himself, that's encouraging. But see, they were living such a raggedy life. Now, they live in such a raggedy life that they couldn't even grab hold of that concept. They couldn't grab hold of that concept because if they could have, if they would have, they would have been grateful and repentant. And when I say grateful and repentant, what I'm saying is they would have had a change of mind. But it seemed like the more God did for them, the more ungrateful they became, and the more rebellious they became. And so Micah then said, you know, this God is promising to do great things for you. You got to get your mind right. It's a hard thing for us to do to get our mind right, isn't it? It's a hard thing for us to do to get our mind right. So God said that I have contention with you. You know, God always, it seems like he always want to bring them into court. You know, call them into court. You're guilty. One thing about it is they should have been, it seems like they should have been grateful because they knew they were guilty. Now, it's something if you don't know, you're doing something you don't know you're doing. But they were guilty and they knew it. It's like, well, you should be thanking God. You should be thanking God for that. And so I had to think about it up here. Let me see if I can find it. And I just want you to think on this as we are ending. Okay, let's read that together. Read it one more time. Do you believe that? You believe that? So we got to know his character. What is his character? His character is love, pure, joy, truth, honesty. His character. The better we know his character, the better we know that he's faithful. The better we know that he's faithful when things come upon us, when things begin to happen to us, the more we can trust him. The more we can trust him. The better we know that he did it for me then. And if he did it for me then, he'll do it for me again. The more we can trust him, the better we know that he's never let me down. Everything he does, I can depend on him. The better we know that. And we know that through his word, and we know that through prayer. We know that through just understanding and laying out before him. We know that through worship. We know the better we know the character of God. God is holy. The better we know the character of God. God is just. The better we know the character of God, we'll be able to stand up when we're going through. Now, I'm not saying, and don't give me the one, I'm the first one to just, I had to get up this morning and sit on the side of the bed, Carray. I had to cry out, Lord, be a fence. I'm trying to tell you, I'm the first one. But I know this. I know he is the fence. And I know when I get weak, I know I can fall over on him. I know he'll hold me up. I know he will. I know he will. In my time of weakness, in my time of trouble, ain't got nobody else to call on. Nobody else to call on. Better understand you like the Lord. Nobody take you through like the Lord. I don't even know how I got on that, but I want to close this out by saying happy birthday to Brother Walter Lee Davis. I want to say happy birthday to him. Happy birthday to Sister Jean, whose birthday was yesterday. You know, it's a blessing in growing older. Not so convenient a whole lot of times, but it's a blessing to grow older. And so we thank God for you and thank God that He's allowed you to see another year. And y'all get up and hug them and let them know that you're grateful for their birthdays. God bless you. Give the Lord a hand praise, everybody.